Good afternoon, everybody. Very excited today with a special guest that required me to do quite a bit of homework, but thankfully he's very diligent and he helped me prepare very well as well, because we have no less than Claude Marx, the Director General of CSSF. Hi, Claude. Great to have you with us.
Hi, Rajaa. Happy to be there.
You know, I'm very happy to have you, not because you're only the Director General of CSSF, but I think you bring a human face to the regulator. And we are here to learn from you in terms of human experience, what it means to head such an institution that I think is a baby boom product from 1945, correct?
That's correct. We will celebrate this year 75 years of banking supervision in Luxembourg. That's correct.
So a maturing lady and with fresh blood, given your background, I was very impressed in the end. You know, we see you everywhere and we hear about you and your statements, but you've had an amazing career across the board in the private sector, which not everyone knows, heading a private bank, heading a company that is actually private equity backed. So you've had some experience there and no less than Lombard International, which belongs now to Blackstone. You've also started your career in consulting at Arthur Andersen, and you are a lawyer. So you've had it all covered, and you've basically only been at CSSF, quote unquote, for 4.5 years. And given your very distinguished background, you can only bring a unique flavor to this position, which we are going to discover with you today. I'm sure I forgot a couple of elements to describe you, Claude, but I think your profile stands out a lot, and I look forward to your insights on 3 questions, followed by a Q&A with the audience. So remember, for the viewers, you can log your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So Claude, welcome, and thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Rajaa, for this warm introduction. You know, it's rare that the regulator gets some positive introduction. So thank you for that.
Well, you have to thank yourself and your background, because I only read your biography and understood a very, very impressive professional career, which, you know, could be the best profile to head a private equity fund as well. And you know, before we jump into the question, another thing, just to, you know, big label, what is CSSF doing really? We all know it has this supervision role and authorizes people like us when we want to invest through third-party capital, but I'm sure it's more than that.
Yeah, CSSF has 2 basic roles. The first role is to protect the consumer and to protect the investor. That's one role. And then the second role is to participate in financial stability. That's a joint role that we do together with the central bank, with the Luxembourg Central Bank and the European Central Bank. And then, as you said, of course, you know, as part of these roles, we authorize and supervise a lot of institutions. Every country has a different system. In Luxembourg, we have a system where the CSSF authorizes and supervises basically everything in the financial sector except insurance. Insurance and reinsurance companies are regulated by a different regulator, but other than that, we comprise it all, from banks to asset managers, investment firms, but also auditors. For instance, we authorize auditors and then professionals that work in the IT area or other areas for banks and for asset managers.
So before, you know, we'll try to do a kind of a zoom out exercise, but zooming into CSSF itself, I know you wrote an article for us very kindly called CSSF 4.0 in terms of course, digitalization, the regulator. What does it mean in practice with your 900 plus employees?
Well, I think here you have to start from a helicopter view analysis, and you have to say to yourself, you know, the world is not becoming less complicated. The world is becoming more complicated. There's a lot of regulation, and as far as I can read, you know, and we are not making the regulation, it's not going away, it's not getting less, also the expectations to a regulator gets bigger. You have the European Parliament, you have the people, you know, who suffered from the financial crisis, the public, you have politicians. There's lots of expectations from everybody. So if I put these things together, and 1 + 1 = 3, You know, I will have 900 people today, 1,800 tomorrow, 3,700, and so on, until such time as it becomes too expensive to work in Luxembourg or to be regulated. And so this whole CSSF 4.0 concept comes from the fact that we have to be efficient. And here we are no different from a private company that is growing fast. We have the same challenges. We have to integrate people, we have to digitalize, we have to become modern, we have to have lean processes, we have to be agile. And so we've introduced all these things into the CSSF through various dimensions, from training to lean management programs, to using artificial intelligence to become lean, efficient, transparent, and so that we can do more with fewer people, and so that people also understand why they are working in this institution and that they adhere to it and they enjoy being at the CSSF.
I guess then it came in handy when the crisis hit with COVID-19, moving everybody off-site. I don't know how you managed that.
I think, to be fair, you know, nobody was ready for a pandemic. We all had BCPs. The industry had their BCPs. We had our BCP. But what we did have as an advantage is that we had equipped all the people already a few years ago with mobile tools, be it laptops, tablets, smartphones, and so on. We've also got a very good VPN connectivity, and we could easily grant access to our core systems to a maximum number of staff. And so what that meant is that within the first week, actually on day one, we could already be 58% off-site. And by the end of the first week of the lockdown, we were 98% working remotely, and we have been ever since. It has worked.
So does that mean, Claude, you were not delayed in authorizing certain operations or granting approval to others?
No, we've made it a rule that from the first day, we kept all external meetings, we kept all internal meetings, and we made sure that authorizations that were in the process of being handled were completed. But we also got new files for authorization during that period. And I think it has worked fine. I mean, several large institutions have made the comment that other jurisdictions have been problematic. Access has been difficult to the regulator. But as I said, we have kept 100% of all meetings, internal, external, and continued to work so far without a glitch. That being said, you know, our IT guys, our HR guys, and so on, they were working around the clock. In our fund area as well, you know, there was a lot of stress. People have worked many weekends, so it was not an easy ride, but I think so far we've managed to do well.
Well, that's very reassuring for PE, although I have to say our business has slowed down significantly, but hasn't stopped, and this will please our community. And speaking of PE, now from a regulatory standpoint, you know, obviously we are here, LPEA, to promote Luxembourg as a hub. We do everything we can in that sense, but we need a helping hand from the public sector. How do we keep our competitive edge in today's challenging regulatory environment?
That's a very good question, because we have various conflicting trends here. You know, Luxembourg used to be special. Luxembourg introduced first the modern fund regulation, the UCITS directive, and then other directive. And by doing so, we started to build a competitive edge. And we need to keep this. Also, the way we interpreted various things was nimble, was business friendly, whilst being compliant, of course, with the directive and the European framework. And this becomes, of course, ever more challenging as we go along, because more and more things are centralized, more and more things are done by regulation and not by directives, which leaves less leeway to the national authorities. But I'm very confident here that we will continue to keep our competitive edge in the PE area or other areas, actually, because this easy and nimble access to the regulator and the possibility to discuss files at a high level from the very beginning is still there, and we are making sure that this does not go away despite all digitalization and all modern tools.
Mm-hmm.
This is for me key to remaining competitive, and that's one of my key priorities.
So does this get confirmed because you're a member of the board of supervisors of ESMA? And do you manage to make our voice heard in the right level and tone?
Yes, absolutely. I think there, you know, despite all what you can hear or what you can read, I think that we have very good debates at ESMA, and we have no issue to play by the rules and to fully contribute ourselves to regulatory convergence. Let me give you an example. We had, there was a fear when Brexit came that there would be a race to the bottom as far as regulatory requirements are concerned. And so the question came, how can we make sure in Europe that this does not happen? Jurisdictions do not compete for the least regulation. And so somebody had the idea at ESMA to create a supervisory coordination network where all files, all authorization files to do with Brexit would be sent to ESMA, reviewed by ESMA. I was very relaxed when this was discussed and decided, because I knew that we had, for many years, we had required substance in Luxembourg. We did not have letterbox management companies or other financial entities. And so we did agree to that system. We sent 2 senior people there to be part of that review panel. And we sent about 40 files to ESMA related to Brexit to get approved, investment firms, asset managers, and so on, very large ones you know about. And all files passed. All files were found to be, you know, sufficiently stuffed with documented, but also there was sufficient substance. And so this demonstrates, because there was a peer review, so to say, of all files, and not all other files of other countries passed easily, but the Luxembourg files did pass.
I always say it's a matter of making our voice more heard abroad, because obviously Luxembourg's very low profile culture, and sometimes the message gets diluted in the modesty of it. But
and you are right, and we can do something about that, because also, you know, not only are we modest, but also we have something which is we see ourselves with 2 critical eyes, and we have to have more self-confidence. We have to overcome this and be more self-confident that what we do is actually of very high standards and very good. But I can also tell you that this was appreciated by large firms when it came to choosing a hub for in the EU 27 for Brexit.
No, for sure, and we see it very much at our level on PE. So obviously, this all comes as well from your impulse. I said in the intro, you come from the private sector. How has that helped you in you know, trigger a new momentum, and how do you build the bridge between public and private, because your clients are all clients who quote are private, but your constituencies in the backstage are all public? How does that work?
Yes, well, a few things. I think that first of all, you know, we are an authority and we are a public institution, so we have our mission, and we have to keep to that mission. And I think we have very senior people, very experienced people who make sure that we don't get off that path. And this is not inconsistent with the proximity, with being available, with keeping the dialogue with organizations like LPEA or with ALFI or the ABBL, also the Ministry of Finance, the central bank, and so on. So I think this is not incompatible. Now, you talk about private-public exchanges. That's a theme that's very dear to me. Of course, coming from the private sector. By the way, in our management team now, we have other people that came from the private sector, which is new. That has never existed before, but I think it's very positive. also in the 300 or so people that we recruited over the last 3-4 years, the vast majority comes with 5-10 years experience from the private sector. And again, that makes a big difference. If it was for me, you know, we should institutionalize this passage from private to public and from public to private. We should have it more. There are a few examples. I think if you look at Luc Frieden, for instance, he was a minister for many years, and then he went work for Deutsche Bank. And we should have this much more. And we could actually institutionalize it. And we could require, for instance, that people in the public sector get some training or experience in the private sector, and vice versa.
We'll take your word for this and offer you some of our people.
Yes, well, we could open up the public sector also for trainees, you know, from the private sector. But it would need buy-in from all stakeholders. But it would do the country a lot of good if we had more of these exchanges.
I think it's a great idea, and all associations should sit together with you to try and come up with something on this level. And that's something we will remember from the interview. It's already time for Q&A, and there's 4 or 5 questions. Let me start with the first one. It has to do with e-signatures. Apparently notaries still don't accept it, but what about CSSF? Does it accept when all the right measures and regulatory precautions are taken? Would you accept e-signatures?
Yeah, well, first of all, there is a law in Luxembourg that has been around for several years, where the e-signature, if it has certain standards, is equivalent to an original. So I think that's one thing. But more importantly, also as part of our CSSF 4.0 strategy that you mentioned before, we are more and more communicating through secure e-channels with the supervised entities, from the authorization process to supervision to questions and answers. And there we require no signature. So we, you know, once you are identified and logged into our what we call e-desk, then we can freely communicate. And this desk, by the way, serves also other purposes. It creates transparency, it shows delays, it shows where a file is sitting, who to contact, and so on. So there are many advantages.
That's wonderful. I didn't know that.
And, yes.
Okay. Other question is, you know, along those lines, obviously I have to speak for my community, and as an investor myself, we are always scared to come to CSSF nowadays, especially since Brexit, thinking it's going to be too slow and bureaucratic, not pure democratic, to get authorized for a certain business. Am I allowed to ask this question, Claude?
You are absolutely allowed to ask this question. It's a very good question, and it should be asked more, actually. So a few things. I think we can commit to a few things. First, you will always be received quickly at the CSSF. If you ask for an appointment, you will get it. If you want to talk to a manager of the CSSF, you can talk to a manager of the CSSF. I think for us in Luxembourg, this sounds normal, but it is not normal at an international scale. So I think that's very important. Secondly, we can commit to look at files quickly. There is one condition, and that is the quality of the file. And what we see sometimes with some intermediaries, and that I don't want to generalize because that's not fair, but sometimes we get files that are very poor quality, and then we have 8, 9, 10 iterations going back and forth. And sometimes I have the impression that we actually educate some junior intermediaries that work on this file. We make their education, and this is slowing down the process.
That's annoying.
Now, I have mentioned the e-desk before, and one of the features that we are building into that e-desk is like a chess clock, you know, where you can see how much time a file is where, who is dealing with a file, and where it is stuck, what is missing. It will create complete transparency, and you will also see actually how many days it took for a file to get approved. From that, we will then extract statistics that we will publish.
Wow, that's a big scoop.
The type of entity, the type of fund, you know, alternative funds, usage, and within each category, subcategories. And we will then be able to compare also quarter by quarter how this is evolving. Of course, it should evolve in the good direction. But that is one of the objectives of this transparency.
Well, we will test that. When are the next statistics going to be published?
Well, this system is being worked on. It's being finalized now. It has to do with this e-desk, and but it is something that will go live as from this year.
Wonderful. So there's two more questions if you have time for us. One is about the dream, of course, of any investor. Do we get a chance that regulation may go back the other way as it was before the crisis and become more light? Or let's say you mentioned you do everything to be transparent, but it doesn't mean that you can't comply with the regulation that's imposed on us from OECD, EU level.
That's true. I mean, the good news is that I don't see currently new big blocks of regulation. So, you know, we have created the banking supervisory framework. We have created an asset management supervisory framework. And I do not see huge new blocks of regulation coming. Now, that being said, I have never seen in my professional career less regulation. And I'm not overly optimistic to see less regulation. And again, as a regulator, we don't write regulation. So sometimes when the market says it's difficult, it's also difficult for us. So it's good to have regulation. Not all regulation is necessarily good. But I think that we have to cope with it and we have to apply it as well as possible. That's also important for the reputation of Luxembourg. So what I can say is that I don't see less regulation coming. We will make sure at the CSSF that we apply proportionality to the extent that it is permitted. And that will help, of course, smaller firms also entering the market to work well in this jurisdiction.
That's all welcome news. So the questions are pouring in, Claude, unfortunately or fortunately. Do you feel any pressure from the EU, ESMA in particular, that you know very well, or that kind of institution, on Luxembourg being business friendly, if you want to say that way?
No, I don't. I mean, occasionally you see the attacks and you see the préjugés, of course. But I think that, you know, we have nothing to hide. We have nothing to be ashamed of. I think we play by the rules. We apply the rules. We have embraced transparency for many years now. And these are all cliches then from the past. But at a senior level, at the ECB or at the EBA or at ESMA, I can assure you that there is no thinking that Luxembourg is a dodgy place or that there is an issue.
So it's up to the media to relay the right message now for the wider public.
It's up to the media, but it's also up to all of us to apply certain standards in a good way, as we have been over the last few years, to keep it up. Because as you have seen in the area of money laundering, and not in Luxembourg, I must say, but in other jurisdictions, you know, one or two big accidents can change your reputation, your perception. And the good news is that we have not had such accidents in Luxembourg, and that's not a coincidence.
On the contrary, we have only good examples to show off with. I agree with you. So 3 more questions, and I promise I stop then. There is a question on the GAFI review. Is it going to be delayed because of the pandemic?
It is going to be delayed. So if I take the last step of this GAFI review or audit, the last step is the discussion in a plenary session with all countries present of the outcome of the review. And that is now scheduled for October 2021. And then we can back calculate how it's going to work. So the actual on-site visit is going to be delayed by a few months, and also the submissions that have to be done will be delayed by a few months. But it's only a few months, and I would say, you know, let's prepare well, as we were on track to do anyway. And let's not get distracted by this technical delay, which at the end of the day is meaningless.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Claude. Again, an EU-related question. The AML body that's been discussed, Would you welcome it in Luxembourg to be set up here?
Yeah, I mean, it's not for me, obviously, to comment whether, we should have, we should not have, we will have, we will not have. The current thinking of the European Commission is that we should have a central AML control body. Now, to some extent, we already have it because the EBA was chosen to be the European authority that is in charge of AML matters for all business lines. So insurance, banking, investment firms, and so on. That's already the case. And now, so the question now is, should we build a common investigation, control, supervision authority dedicated to AML? That is the plan of the Commission. I cannot tell you whether that's good or bad. We will, of course, work with it if it is up and running. The one thing I can tell you is that the main thing not to have accidents in the area of anti-money laundering is going to be a local care that we all have, and that we have to be careful not to be abused at local level for money laundering purposes. Mm-hmm. And we are doing that well now, and we should keep doing that well, regardless of whether there's a central authority, because the central authority, whether it is sitting in Frankfurt or in Brussels or in Paris, will not be able to detect money laundering going on in grocery shops in Finland or in Greece or in Portugal. So there will always be a need to have this local watch.
Thank you, Claude. So to wrap it up, let's look a little bit at the future. You're supposed to have a 5-year mandate. It's expiring in February 2021. And you always tell me that you want the CSSF to be future ready. So is it, and what's left to be done for that purpose? And how do you see the context of regulation going forward?
Well, the mandate, I'm not going to comment. I mean, the mandate is like any mandate. It is a 5-year mandate. And if both parties agree, it could be extended, whatever. I think my focus here is not that one. My focus is that together with my management team, and this is actually a team effort, we have laid the foundations to make this public institution future fit. The CSF 4.0 is an important component in there. It goes, as I said, from digital to people to training to embracing new technologies like artificial intelligence. And those foundations we have now laid. We have transformed the institution internally from IT to HR and so on. And we have built the good connections with whoever the connections have to be. So this is on the rails. Is it all completed? No, it's not all completed. There's still work to be done. But I am confident that this will be done and the CSF will be future ready.
That's wonderful. Claude, thank you so much. And I want also to congratulate you because I know you're working hard for financial education, which is another mission we try to put forward. And we should all put our efforts together again to demystify finance, because in the end, we're all working for the real economy. But I think that
is a good area, Rajaa, that you mentioned this. We should work together on financial education. And financial education has many facets, it is starting at a very basic level to make people literate so that they don't become personally broke. And of course, talking about that in the current context of COVID is particularly important. But there's an external factor which we cannot influence right now. But it is also investor education. As you know, we are still underinvested in this part of the world, not only in investment funds, but also into private equity. Reversely, you are sitting on a lot of cash right now, so you are ready to make investments. And I think, this educational effort, if we connect the dots well and work together well, this is also important for the Capital Markets Union in Europe, but it will do the industry also a lot of good. So I think this is a project we should work together. And the related subject is the subject of sustainable finance, because that's another area which is now an opportunity, I would say, for us all, to become better investors, more investors, but also invest in the right thing, in sustainable investments. And Luxembourg there can play a leading role if we all work together.
So we'll, if you allow us, we will reach out and together with the other associations and make sure we have a joint initiative along those lines. It's wonderful. Claude, thanks again.
Welcome.
Stay safe. And maybe if you go back to the office on Monday, good luck. Huh? Look forward
to
more guideline. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.